It is September 11th, 2022, and you are now watching Real Talk with Ronnie. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the fastest growing political talk show in New Jersey. I'm Ronald Lynn, your host, and here on Real Talk with Ronnie, we only engage in real talk, real news, in real time. We are back for our third season after being off the air for a few months, and we've got a fantastic new season in store for you this time around. We are airing on Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, and Getter. Additionally, you can catch our show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Just search for Real Talk with Ronnie. Pretty soon, we'll be airing on my new television network, Limbright TV, found exclusively on Roku, the largest streaming service in the world, seen by over 50 million people worldwide. So stay tuned. As always, check out our website at www.realtalkronnie.com for everything you need to know about our groundbreaking show. Today is September 11th, a somber day, as we remember the 21st anniversary of 9/11, a day that changed our country forever. It's hard to imagine that in a blink of an eye, 21 years has passed already. 21 years ago this day, I was a sophomore in college, brushing my teeth and getting ready for class when the first plane struck the first tower. Shortly thereafter, the second plane struck the second tower, and just like that, the world changed forever, and democracy as we knew it was under attack. Today, we remember the thousands of lives lost on that day, as well as the thousands more who sacrificed their lives since then to protect our freedoms and way of life. As I speak, the America that we know and love is once again at a precipice. 21 years ago today, we faced an external foe. Our enemies attacked our country because they hated our democratic principles and ideals. 21 years later, the enemy we face is from within. As Abraham Lincoln once eloquently said, "A house divided cannot stand." The America of today is on the verge of crumbling. The Democratic Party of today has made it their top priority to attack our families, faith, and freedoms, everything we hold dear. How did we get to where we are today in just a short 21 years? There are many explanations, but the best and only way we can restore our American values and greatness is actually still within our power. In less than 60 days, we will be facing perhaps the most important election in our nation's history. This is our last chance to save our country before all is lost. I implore everybody to vote for common sense, to vote for accountability, and to vote for the core values that made our country great in the first place. I'm on the ballot again this year, and for those of you who reside in Bergen County, New Jersey, I urge you to vote for my team and I on column one, on November 8th. Please check out my website, www.winwithlynn.us, to learn about my campaign for Bergen County Commissioner, and if you can, make a donation. That contribution will yield dividends and will help ensure that our divided nation will not fall. To kick off our first show this season, I had the great honor of sitting down with my great friend and frequent guest to our show, Mr. Frank Pallotta. Frank ran for Congress from New Jersey's 5th Congressional District 2 years ago and came within 7 points of defeating the incumbent Josh Gottheimer. This year, Frank has secured the Republican nomination once more and is hoping to finish in 2 short months what he started 2 years ago. Please join me in welcoming back onto Real Talk with Ronnie, my good friend, Mr. Frank Pallotta.
Hold up, baby.
Frank, thank you for coming back on Real Talk with Ronnie. I believe this is number 5 now, right?
This is number 5. I think I feel like I'm the Steve Martin of Saturday Night Live with real talk. So thank you.
And you know, this is a very special one because this is your 5th episode and you're running for District 5.
That's
So
right.
5 for 5, right?
Uh-huh.
5 for
Good
Frank.
thing I'm not running in 12. I'd have to do 12,
Well, I mean,
12 episodes with you.
we could do that, right?
Exactly.
All right, so Frank, the first time we met was actually in 2020, October of 2020, right?
Uh-huh. That's right.
And it's been almost 3 years now. No, sorry, it's almost 2 years now,
Yep.
right? And a lot has happened
Sure.
since then. I think one big difference is that, last time versus this time, this time we're both on the ballot together.
We are. Finally, we get
Yeah.
to work together on the
Right.
ballot. I'm looking forward to it.
So it's a great honor to have the opportunity to run with you,
Um,
and congratulations on getting the nomination again this
Thank you. Thank
time.
you.
I noticed that on your wall you have a certificate of nomination from 2020, right?
Yes, we're waiting for the 2022 to come in.
Cool,
You get one of those. It's all the time and effort and money you put in, and they
Right.
send you
Right.
a little banner.
So
certificate.
that's worth something, right?
It's worth something. I
Right.
think it's worth more to the person who has it than
Right.
anyone else. But who knows? In the memorabilia market, what it might bring somewhere down the road.
Yep. You could always sell it on like eBay, right? If you needed some extra campaign cash, right? Okay, so Frank, for all our viewers that are watching right now, why don't you give us a rundown about who is Frank Pallotta?
You know what, Ronnie, the same person that you interviewed 2 years ago,
Right.
the same person, even though we had our first interview 2 years ago, we knew each other before that.
Right.
And you know what, I love the political process. I love it mostly because I've never lost or moved away or forgot, where I grew up and who I was and who I served. I think too many politicians and people who jump into the race jump in for the glory of running, and they like their name on a ballot. And you and I talked about this 2 years ago.
Right.
You do this to serve,
Mhm.
and it's what I do. I worked in the private sector for more than 25 years, in the financial services area more than 25 years, and I loved serving the people. When I worked, and you've heard me talk about this, I made sure that you did what was right by your customers and your shareholders.
Right.
And in politics, your customers and shareholders are your voters. So it feels like it's a natural progression, Ronnie, but my background, I feel, dovetails perfectly with what we need here in the district, what we need in the state, and what we need in the country. And you and I are absolutely aligned on that. So that's who I am. I'm the same private sector guy who's trying to take what I knew and what I learned in the private sector and apply it to government.
Right. Now, give us a little rundown on your background, though, because you graduated from St. John's, right, in Queens,
Queens, New York.
same city as our former president, right?
Exactly.
And so you kind of have that Queens swagger too, right?
Some people call it swagger. Some have
Right.
other names for
Right,
it.
yeah.
But I grew up in Woodhaven, Queens, and Donald Trump's father's first home, I believe, was in
Okay.
Woodhaven, Queens.
All right.
So that's where I went to. I went to New York City public school there, and before I went to St. John's University.
Right. After St. John's, you worked for some of the biggest banks, right?
Yeah, I was lucky, Ron. I found myself on Wall Street at the time. There was a lot of hiring going on in the financial services industry, and I knew Goldman Sachs was one of the premier investment banks.
Right.
And I happened to stop in there, and they had some availability, and I liked what they were doing, and they liked what they saw in me, and I spent 13 years there. So
Wow.
it was a great opportunity, and from there I moved to a couple of other firms, and that's how my 25-year career ended with Morgan Stanley in 2008, 2009.
Right.
So I was very blessed with the opportunity, but it never went to my head.
Okay, great. So it wasn't anything like from Wolf of Wall Street, right? During the 80s in Wall Street, where there was like wild parties and stuff
No,
going on?
if that was happening, it happened
Right.
before I got involved, but that's not how the world was like at Goldman or Morgan Stanley. I think there were a lot of firms around Wall Street that you saw things like that, but I never saw that. I was the young guy. We didn't make enough money back then, and we worked. We were in the office at 6:30, 6:45 in the morning, and a lot of times.
And you had to sleep like overnight there, right? Pretty much.
Pretty much. Look, there were a long time. There was a long time, Ronnie, where I didn't get home until 8:30, 9, 10 o'clock at night. So I loved it.
Right. You liked it.
I did, yeah.
Doesn't sound too much different than campaigning season now, too, right?
Yeah, it's. I like it. I like campaigning. As I said earlier, it's sales 101.
Right.
And
Except when you're campaigning, you're kind of selling yourself, right?
you're selling yourself. You're
Right.
not selling a product.
Right.
And the good thing about that is, you get an immediate answer. In politics, as you know, if they like you, they vote for you. So they get to see the product while it's in front of them. You know, when you talk to a voter, Ronnie, I watch how people react to you when you talk to them, and that tells me a lot about who the candidate is by how the people react to what they're saying and what they're doing and the questions that come. So that's, you know,
Right.
if you're not raising money, you're shaking hands. When you're not shaking hands, you're out doing,
Right, but
you know, other...
typically, you know, when we go out campaigning, right, I just leave you with the talking because you're the Goldman guy, right? So, so you can sell anything. So,
or you know, it's I like to talk,
right? Yeah,
and you know, you're out there with me as well, Ronnie, and we've been out there together, and
Right.
there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot going on in this district and in this state.
But it's not so much that you like to talk; it's that people like to listen to what you're talking about, right? And that's why I think voters like you.
Yeah, Ronnie, you know, our backgrounds, I think, are similar. You know, you and I don't come from magnificent wealth.
Right.
You know, we
Kind of wish I did, though.
would make it easier.
Right.
You know, a middle class background in the district we run in. Well, it's a wealthy district, Ron. It's not generational wealth.
Right.
You know, not taking anything away from, you know, the Greenwiches and the Westchesters of the world. Bergen County, you know, and Sussex County and Passaic are good working class, wealthy, you know, individuals, but they still get up in the morning. A lot of two-parent households that are working. Kids have student loans. So people like what we have to say because we are them.
Right.
We're not elitist about what we do, and that's why people gravitate to you and I.
Okay. Yeah, and I noticed that on your wall back there, you have a frame of your best invention, right, on Time Magazine.
Yes.
You want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. We when I left Morgan Stanley in 2008, we formed a startup that helped people who were struggling through the financial crisis, and it wasn't just helping them as much as it was creating an algorithm and an organization around finding people who we believe through the analysis we put together would have a hard time through the financial crisis. And there's a number of different metrics we looked at, and we were able to provide them assistance free of charge to them, free of charge to the government and the taxpayer.
Right.
But we were able to marry a number of programs that were available by the government with the people who needed them before they needed them.
Right.
And that program, that concept is what won us the award. Time Magazine reached out to us, I think in maybe it was the end of 2009 or early 2010, I don't remember exactly. And they said, hey, you know, you've been nominated for one of the best inventions of 2010. And I thought it was my buddies playing a joke on me because I didn't view it, Ronnie, as an invention. I viewed it as, first of all, it was the opportunity to help people.
Right.
But what they said to us was, it's not always an invention. Sometimes it's a concept.
Right.
And no one has married the concept of behavioral economics and incentive theory with a mortgage contract and marrying the two. And it was not only wildly successful from a standpoint of being able to lower, almost eliminate default rates, but the first group that we helped, Ronnie, 10,000 people, the first 10,000 were veterans.
Right.
We went after the veteran community to help them because veterans, and you and I talked about this, veterans are the last group to raise their hand and say, help me, and the first group to raise their hand and say, what do you need?
Right.
So we thought they were a great group to help. And Time Magazine ended up calling us at the end of their search period and said, you guys won.
Right.
And we finished ahead of the iPad that year.
Wow. So you were which number?
I think we were top 10. I don't remember which number we were, but yeah, we were top 10.
So you beat the iPad.
We beat the iPad.
Beat Steve Jobs.
Yeah, I think he ended up in a better spot than we are, you know, over the ensuing decade or so.
Yeah. Well, physically, currently, I think you're in the better spot.
I think right now I'm in a better spot.
Yeah. Okay. So, you know, 2022 versus 2020, two very different times, two very different years.
Yep.
I was looking at our, I believe the second interview that we did back in 2021. It was right after the election, right? And it's actually kind of funny. In that interview, I was saying, well, you know, are you going to run in 2022? And at that point, you were, you know, still thinking about it. And I think I said something like, well, let's just hope that by then, you know, COVID is no longer an issue.
Yeah.
And I think you were like, well, if it's still an issue then we got bigger problems.
Yeah.
Lo and behold, it's still an issue.
It is. It is. But it's an issue now, Ronnie, I think that helps the Republican Party.
Right.
And what I mean by that is it was an issue that hurt the party 2 years ago. And the biggest reason it hit, were two big reasons why it hurt elections here in New Jersey. Because as you know, New Jersey was one of the very few blue states
Right.
that didn't flip a single seat.
Right. Yeah. Mhm.
And one of the reasons was the case is mandatory vote by mail
mandatory.
did not allow voters to go out to the booth and vote. And there was confusion around it. At one point, Donald Trump had mentioned, don't go to the voting booth to vote. Don't do vote by mail, go right to the voting booth.
Right.
Which, if you had an option, all Republicans like to go to the voting booth as opposed to vote by mail. But because New Jersey was mandatory vote by mail, there was some confusion. Not really an excuse, but you've got more registered Democrats than Republicans in New Jersey.
Right.
Probably 1.3 or 1.4 to 1. So you're already starting in a hole just based on the number of ballots that are sent out. So one of our thoughts was if we can get through the pandemic and the crisis to the point where there wasn't mandatory vote by mail, we would have a fighting chance. But the Democrats will try anything they can to try and raise some issue to keep.
They're very crafty, right? I mean,
that's a good word.
We're in a year where, if you think about it, in any normal sense, Democrats shouldn't win, right? Our economy is down the tubes.
Yeah.
Cost of living is high. Cost of gas is high. We're at war. In the entire world, right? I mean, there's war just breaking out everywhere. But yet, never underestimate the Democrats' ability to win, right? So I mean, this year we've got to give it all we got, right? Because I really do feel like if we don't win this year, then there truly is no hope. What do you think?
A lot of people have said that. I don't disagree with that. And your point about leave it to the Democrats to find a path,
right?
They're good at marketing.
Right.
Republicans are very good with the issues. And when you speak to a voter and you look them in the eye and you talk to them about the issues, we win. We win all the time. When the crafty institution that we call the Democrat Party decides the spin will work, and again, they're marketing, they're savvy marketers. For example, Build Back Better. Build Back Better was a tax increase, plain and simple. But what happened? We started to see inflation pick up. So they renamed Build Back Better to the Inflation Reduction Act. It's not reducing inflation at all. It's a tax increase. So it's what they decide to call things. The infrastructure bill last year, better than $1 trillion bill, very little of that money went to infrastructure.
Right, and
it was also a tax increase.
Right, and actually, what has what have they built back?
They've not built anything better. I mean, you saw they're hiring 87,000 IRS agents. Some ungodly number of 72 or 73% of all audits are done with on people who make less or organizations that make less than $200,000. So we're in a position now where we know what they're doing. They're coming after the middle class.
Yeah.
They're coming after you and I, Ronnie, and they're doing it. They're doing it unabashed. They're doing it, they're unashamed.
Right. And I'm sure you all saw that speech last week with Biden. Yeah. With the red background, right? It looked very, very sinister, right?
It was sinister. I would have thought that somebody in the administration would have said, you probably don't want to use a background that Castro would have used or Mao or some third world dictator would have used, Stalin. But yeah, the fact that he used that background was very surprising.
Or do you think he was subconsciously trying to telegraph what they're trying to do?
Well, it was either somebody didn't think about it, or it was a form of intimidation. I think it was a form of intimidation because it wasn't just a question, Ronnie, of the look.
Right.
The words he used were very inflammatory.
Yeah.
And the combination of what he said, how it looked, and his motions in his hand, he was very angry with the fists. It was not a good look for a president.
This is coming from a guy who said he wanted to unite the country, right?
He's done anything but unite the country. And I think we all know that. And his team is not about uniting the country. They continue to push back on our party simply because we want to defend our kids. And we want to defend our way of life. So I hope the voters understand. They just need to understand in larger numbers.
Okay. Now, 2022 versus 2020, very, very different years with different issues too, right? So I'm sure the issues that you campaigned on in 2020 will be, the issues you campaigned on this year will be different than the ones you campaigned on in 2020, right?
Yes.
Different to what extent?
Well, the number one issue in 2020 was clearly coming on the heels of the pandemic. People didn't really know at that point that there was a lot of overreaction and overreach by the government, as well as hyperbole by Fauci.
Right.
But still, people, were people died, people were sick. I don't think as many people would have died in New Jersey if Josh Gottheimer and some of the other representatives in the state would have stood up to Phil Murphy, who had terrible, terrible policies in terms of how we sent veterans and elderly back to their homes that didn't have enough protections. And we all know he was wrong because lawsuits are being paid out in the tens of millions of dollars. So that was one of the bigger issues. The issue that jumps up now in 2022 is the economy, but it's different. It wasn't the economy as a result of a health crisis. It's the economy as a result of poor policies being enacted by the Democrat Party. So the number one issue, when you have gas at $5 a gallon, when you have inflation at 8.5%, which is a 43-year high, when you've got issues with lines and stocking the shelves, it's about the economy overall. And the pocketbook always wins when it comes to an issue. Crime is another issue. That was not a really big issue. It was probably top 5, Ronnie, in 2020. It's top 2 or 3 now.
Right.
And that's a big issue that we're looking at. And it's an issue that not just Josh Gottheimer's on the wrong side of, but the Democrat Party's on the wrong side of. The people you're running against are on the wrong side of that. So this should be, if we have the opportunity to get the message out and people understand what we bring to the table, not just as a party, but what we bring to the table as people who live and work and raise our families in the state, then people will understand that we're looking at what's best for them.
Okay. Well, there's one issue that the Democrats want to focus on for 2022, and that issue is with, women's rights when it comes to, reproductive choices, right? I think they saw that as a winning issue in the congressional race in New York State, right? It was a special election race where the Democrat narrowly won. So I think now the Democrats as a whole are trying to tack on that issue, right? On how, we are trying to take away a woman's right to, abortion and that kind of stuff. How do you respond to attacks from Democrats when it comes to that?
Well, as you know, Ronnie, I'm a pro-life candidate. And when the opposite supports late-term abortions up to and including the moment of birth, my understanding of what pro-life is becomes a little more obvious when the Democrats are about infanticide and taking a life and taking a death. I'm all for the woman understanding that there are a variety of choices that she would have to take. My choice and my thought is the choice of life. That's how I grew up. I'm one of 5. That's how my father raised me. That's how my family raised me. But it doesn't mean I don't appreciate all the decisions that everybody makes when it comes to that. But what this really did, what the overturning of Roe v. Wade really did, Ronnie, was move the decision to the state level, which is honestly what our founders, what the Constitution calls for. Unfortunately, it won't change in New Jersey.
Right. In New Jersey is actually codified, right? It's codified into law that a woman can get an abortion up until the time of birth. Right. So in New Jersey, that's actually a non-issue. But the Democrats still want to make it an issue.
They want to make it an issue because they like to move from issue-based campaigns to relative issue-based campaigns where people are concerned about the economy and they're concerned about crime and they're concerned about their children, and the Democrats don't have a response to that. So what do? They're going to talk about pro-choice, a pro-choice initiative. So we're about the issues. The Republican Party is about the real issues, Ronnie, that keep people up at night. So that's what we're going to stick to, and that's what's important.
Now, District 5, which is your congressional district. Are there any specific concerns in District 5 that are different than other districts in the state?
District 5 is one of the rare districts in the state where District 5 is almost a microcosm of the entire state. As you know, we've got the very urban areas of Pagoda and Hackensack and Fort Lee and Teaneck, and you've got larger neighborhoods like we see all across New Jersey, but then you've got a lot of farm area, a lot of farmland. So you can drive an hour in New Jersey and go from bumper to bumper, high-rise, 60-story apartments to sprawling, 150
Right.
acre farms, and you're all in the same district.
Right.
And Josh Gottheimer makes sure that he spends his time in those urban areas, which tend to be a little more Democrat, versus the farmlands and a lot of the suburban areas of New Jersey, where they tend to be a little more Republican. But that's really what I love about this district is, I was at an event last night with Chairman Hugan and a few others where we were on the lake. We were on
Right.
Lake Opatcon and,
Right.
and driving up there between the mountains and the lush greenery, and then you come back and you're coming back into Bergen County,
Right.
into areas in eastern Bergen County where I went to another event, and we're talking about houses and high rises and small businesses and bodegas all around the district. So it's interesting to see the different areas of the state.
Yeah, when I spoke to Jack Ciattarelli, who ran for governor, right, he was saying that Jersey is like the biggest small state, right?
Yes.
And we've got the beaches, we've got the high rises, we've got the farmlands, right? We've kind of got it all, right?
Yeah. It's one of the reasons, I'm here 32 years.
Right.
So.
And that's one of the reasons why I think a lot of people from other states come to our state, because it's a very beautiful state. Unfortunately, though, the people that migrate to our states, they also bring their politics here.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons why our state has gotten more and more blue.
Yeah, it has. Its proximity to New York City.
Right.
New York City is very blue.
Right.
And, what I find puzzling is a lot of the people who escape New York City and escape Manhattan, and come to New Jersey, the suburban areas of New Jersey, they do it based on home prices and your ability to get more bang for your buck. And while the taxes are higher, the police protection is different. It's better. The schools are better. And they come here, when you bring your policies, they tend to forget the reason they moved here was because of the Republican policies that were here.
Right.
And, a little more than 15 or so years ago, Bergen County was good, solid red. And as you said, people started coming over from the blue states, and they started to bring their policies and their voting
and their voting habits
over. And now what do we have? We've got a tremendous increase in crime. In Bergen County, Ronnie, you know this. You and I both live here. The number of carjackings, the number of house break-ins that we're seeing. I've been here 30 years. I know you're barely 30 years old. But it's off the charts, Ronnie.
Right.
And that's the problem here. When the Democrat policy supports things like defund the police. Josh Gottheimer wrote the defund the police bill. He didn't just vote for it, he wrote it. When you handcuff our police, not only do you take police away from committing crimes, but you're handcuffing the police to work with communities of color that work very well with our police force. So it's one of those things where you scratch your head and you wonder why those policies come over and why those voting habits come over from blue states when they're escaping. But you're also seeing that in California. They're leaving California to go to Texas.
Right, yeah, or Florida, right? So Josh Gottheimer wrote that bill on defund the police, which to me seems like a pretty liberal policy, right?
Yeah.
He bills himself as this consensus, common sense sort of moderate, right?
That's right.
So how does he get away with that, with calling himself a moderate when he backs, such policies?
Well, it's what we talked about just earlier. They're masters at marketing.
Right.
Josh Gottheimer is a master at telling you what he thinks you want to hear.
Right.
And then when he hops on the Acela and he goes down to Washington, D.C., he votes lockstep with his party.
Right.
He votes 100% with Biden, 97% with Nancy Pelosi, and nearly everything he says he wants to do or he says he's going to do, he doesn't do. And you can tell me what his campaign lawn signs say.
Well, I believe it says lower taxes, Jersey values.
Lower taxes, Jersey
But someone
values.
was telling me that you actually ought to flip it. It should be lower values, Jersey taxes.
Well, that's what it is. I don't know anyone in New Jersey. Not only are the taxes not lower, under Josh and under this Democrat leadership in the state, Ronnie, they've accelerated at a greater rate than we've seen in a long time.
Right.
And so that's really, he's counting on people listening to what he's saying and not doing the homework. And it's our job to make sure they understand the message you and I deliver.
Right. Because it's like, part of the blame is on the voters too, right? Josh says he's going to do this, but he does the opposite. But then the voters keep voting him in.
Yeah. There's no accountability.
Right.
And politicians need to be held accountable. All of them, both sides.
Right.
And it's one of the things, I worked in the private sector for years. if you don't perform, and there are performance reviews,
Right.
unfortunately we don't have that with politicians.
Right.
They call performance reviews elections, but when you have enough money to spin people to think you're doing the job when you're not, it's amazing, Ronnie, how many people don't know that Josh wrote the defund the police bill.
Well, that's your job to get it
It
out
is
there,
my
right?
job to get out there, and your job, hopefully,
Right, yeah.
through this medium.
Yep. All right. You recently started with your own radio show on
Yes.
AM 970 called, and I love this title, Frankly Speaking.
Frankly speaking, yes.
So what do you talk about on that show?
You know what the issues, Ronnie? It's when we go out and talk to voters, and we gravitate, toward what they think is important, and they gravitate toward the messages that we're delivering. That's what gave us the idea to do that,
Right.
to bring that out there. And frankly speaking, is just that. We talk frankly about the issues that keep people up at night. We talked about the economy. We talked about the police. We have a show today that we're going to talk about national security.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of the things, Ronnie, that I think I'm pretty good, and I think you are, and others that are running as Republicans, in knowing what the hard issues are that,
Right.
that keep people up at night. And that's what Frankly Speaking is about, is
Okay.
frank talk. It's almost like real talk.
Right. Yeah. Almost. Right.
Uh,
It could almost be like a spin-off, right?
I like it. I can be the spinoff.
Right. So when does Frankly Speaking air?
Frankly Speaking airs every Sunday
Okay.
between now and the election. This is our 5th episode, but it airs from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
on Sundays, and then a rebroadcast Thursdays from 9 to 10 p.m.
Okay. Now, can viewers or listeners, call in, or how can they get in touch if they wanted to broadcast their views on?
Well, they
Frankly
can reach
Speaking?
out to us. I mean, we're pretty accessible.
Okay.
Frank at PallottaForCongress.com
Okay.
or info@PallottaForCongress.com is where they can call and either ask a question or say, hey, I'd like to see a show on a certain topic. We're pretty good at responding to what people need here, and we're pretty fast. Our campaign is deft at
Right.
spinning and turning on a dime on what we think the important issues are.
And your website is PallottaForCongress.com, right?
PallottaForCongress.com or Frank4NJ.com.
Oh, okay. So Frank4NJ will redirect them to Pallotta for
Right.
Congress.
It was easier on the radio to
Right.
say Frank for NJ. When you say
Right.
Pallotta
Right.
to 10 people, I
Well,
promise
they're
you
like,
I get
how do you
nine-
spell it? Right.
I get 9 different spellings when I
Right.
say Pallotta. from 10
Okay.
people.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about Frank Pallotta that we may not know if we just read your website? Like something special, something secret about Frank that only like a very close personal friend or maybe your family member would know about you.
Well, people who know me, I'm
Right.
an avid Yankee fan.
Right.
I've always been a Yankee fan. I'm a Steelers fan,
Okay.
and I became a Yankee and a Steeler fan when it wasn't cool to be a Yankee and a Steeler fan. I think the first year I rooted for the Steelers, they were 1-13.
Oh wow.
Wasn't great. When I
Right.
started rooting for the Yankees, it was in the late 60s, early 70s, when they weren't doing a whole lot.
Mhm.
So I came to appreciate not just the underdog, but the concept of building. But the thing I think people, you brought it up, Ronnie, that this Time Magazine award that I won for this, people say, oh, that's great. You came up with it.
Right.
This idea was great. What people don't know is when we first came up with the concept, we met with the United States Treasury Department.
Oh,
we
did
said,
you?
We
Wow.
said we have something that we think will help veterans, and we'd like to do it, and it doesn't cost the taxpayer, and
Right.
it doesn't cost the veteran. And if you're the government and there's a solution that helps veterans and it doesn't cost the veteran or the taxpayer,
Right.
you might think that they would
Yeah.
say, what a great idea. And we were a small company, we were a startup. They didn't like the idea. We didn't know why.
Why didn't they like it?
You know what? I think it had to do with the following. Veterans rarely default on their mortgage loans.
Okay.
Rarely. So they said to me, why would we help a group
Right.
avoid default when they don't default in the first place? And I had 2 simple answers. One is any default rate that's lowered, even if it's a small rate, if you make it even smaller, it's better for the taxpayer.
Mhm.
The second reason is the veteran community, there's no one better
Right.
than them. They go overseas. They serve to make sure, Ronnie, that you and I have the freedoms, that we enjoy the freedoms
Of course.
to speak like this and
Right.
the freedom to run,
To frankly speak, right?
to frankly speak. And when they, I sort of said, well, you do this for veterans because it's the right thing to do. So what did I do when they said they didn't want to do it? I went out and did it on my own. I spent my own money.
Mhm.
I piloted my own program to help veterans. And it was such a wild success for the first 5,000 veterans that we worked on. We went back to the Veterans Administration and we talked to the VA about it.
Right.
And said, look, this is something that we think helps out. We're doing it for nothing. Not just us getting nothing, but it cost the veterans nothing. And then we went back and sat down with Treasury again
Right.
to talk about it. And once they saw the performance results, once they saw the positive responses
Right.
that the banks were getting from the veteran community, then they said. So much like, I was a small startup, Ronnie, and I was able to navigate the quagmire of government to not just help veterans, but to win an award doing it, which you don't endeavor to do when you
Right.
launch this. So I did more as a small startup private sector guy than I think some of our congressional leaders like Josh Gottheimer
Right.
has done being in Congress.
Well, sometimes as a small private sector guy, it's more efficient. You don't have to deal with the government, with the red tape or anything else. So
Yeah, it's the way to do it, Ronnie. Like I said, when you can show either a product or a concept or a feature that benefits both the taxpayer and the people that you're
Right.
elected to serve, you're supposed to do it. In the private sector, we would have done it overnight.
Right.
It took a while for the government
Who
to
was
get
the
it.
Treasury Secretary at the time? Was it Paulson?
Gosh, I don't remember. It was the transition. It might have been Paulson.
Okay.
I think it was the transition.
Paulson is a Goldman guy, right? So you could
Paulson
have
is a
pulled your
Goldman guy.
Goldman strings and been like, "Hey, come on, buddy."
But it actually was over a period of time.
Right.
So I think it was a transition from the Bush administration into the Obama administration. So
Gotcha.
it wasn't. But irrespective, there's a predisposition not to work with small companies
Right.
and new concepts. And once Time Magazine throws an award that there's tens of thousands of inventions they look at, and to be one of the winners of top 10 of the top 50 inventions of tens of thousands that they look at, that opens a few eyes.
Okay. What does Frank Pallotta do for fun? I know you like to cook, right? You like to cook,
I relax by cooking.
right?
The bigger the meal, the more people, the more
Right.
relaxing it is to me.
Yep.
There's no particular. I'm a cook. I like my wife likes to bake,
Right.
because baking is precision. Cooking is not really precision as much as it is taste and feel, and I like to do that. But what my wife thinks is the funniest thing I do. The cooking is easy.
Right.
The prep is easy. What's not easy is making sure that the food that takes an hour to cook, the food that takes 20 minutes to cook, and the food that takes 9 minutes to cook all come out at the same time, and it's all
Right.
hot.
Yeah.
So
it's all about timing too, right?
exactly. You reverse engineer
Right.
the serving. That's what we like to do.
Well, what I do know is that John Azariti, who's a dear friend of ours, who's
Mm-hmm.
a councilman in Saddle River, he's actually quite a chef, right?
I like to cook, but John's a
Yeah.
chef.
So if you ever needed some tips, you could always go to John, right?
I've had many a meal at John's house,
Right.
and John is a genius
Right, yeah.
behind the grill.
I don't know how he finds time, given the fact that he's like a busy doctor too,
He's
right?
well, you're a doctor too. I'm the only one not a doctor.
Well,
for
all right. So going into the general election,
Uh-huh.
2022 versus what you went through in 2020, do you find that it's more difficult this time or last time, or what do you think?
a little bit of both. The
Yeah.
easy part is we've done it before.
Right.
We've been there. It's kind of like your rookie season
Right.
in baseball versus your second or third season. There's a lot of what you know.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of muscle memory. That part of it is easier. The more difficult part is Josh has got another 2 years under his belt.
Right.
So, there's 2 years of him as a sitting congressman. And as a sitting congressman, you've got benefits, not just as a congressman, but there's the power of the incumbency, which has actually started to hurt a number of congressmen and women in the state. I don't know if you heard this. They're now being called to task for a few things.
Right.
First is insider trading. We're seeing outsized returns.
Malinowski is being hit for that, right?
Malinowski is being, what there being violations of what's called the Stock Act.
Right.
They're taking advantage of their position. And when people begin to recognize that, which is becoming a little bit easier for us. So it's harder when they have the power to make money for themselves, and they have the power also to use their office under the umbrella of constituent services
Oh, yeah,
to
of course.
campaign.
Yep.
And they've been called to task on that. I think Andy Kim, certainly Josh Gottheimer, I believe Mikey Sherrill as well, I'll have to look into that, are using taxpayer money,
Right.
money that's being used to run their office to campaign. They have to be kept separately. So
A few weeks ago, there was an event in Saddle River, right? There was like a Beatles concert there.
Yeah, covered
A lot of people, right? thousands. I
Yeah.
think there was up to 1,000 people.
Yeah.
And you saw a table there for Josh Gottheimer.
Mhm.
So, but he did it because it was a constituent.
He called it
services thing.
constituent services at 10:30 at night
Right.
in a park during a concert. So
Right.
we know, like we said, the Democrat Party is great at marketing, and when they throw their hands up and say, well, we're not really campaigning, it's constituent services.
Right.
It's a gathering of 1,000 people with their big sign on the
Right.
front that says vote for Josh Gottheimer for Congress.
I don't think I saw anyone go up to that table.
No, I think there are areas of New Jersey
Right.
that Josh is going to have issues campaigning in, issues where seniors have died because of his silence, issues where the police have been defunded, or at least the discussions around defunding. So the areas around New Jersey that have a high number of seniors, that have a high number of veterans, that have a high number of police officers, I think Josh understands his days are numbered
Right.
in those towns.
And speaking of numbered days,
Yes.
Frank, our election is on November 8th, right?
November 8th.
I think we're less than 60 days, right?
We're less than 60
yep.
days through, yeah.
So, if you're watching this, please go out there and vote for us, right? Column 1. We're in column 1 here.
We're in column 1 together.
County.
Finally, we do get to
Right,
run
yep.
together. But I think, it's the good Lord is watching down on us.
Right.
Putting us in column 1, I think, denotes that we should be the first choice.
Right. I would think so.
As I.
Thank you, Frank.
Ryan, thank you so
Maybe
much.
before the election, we can do a part 6. Let's see, right?
I would like that. And then we'll make sure after the election, after we get elected, we'll do parts 7, 8, 9,
Oh,
and
yeah.
10 in the first term.
Alrighty. All right, Frank. Good luck, and I'll catch you on the other side.
Perfect. Good luck again with your show. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Hold